Now, some knowledgeable people have said that the big question of the first millennium AD was, who is Jesus? You might think of those big councils of the church in the first few centuries that were mainly taken up with, who is Jesus Christ? How do we understand him? Then it said the big question of the second millennium AD was, how are we saved? Most obvious in the Reformation. There is this rediscovery of justification by faith alone. How are we saved? Now, I know we're not very far into the third millennium AD, but so far, the big question is looking set to be, what is a human? What is it to be human? The issue of who we are as humans, that might sound a bit strange to you, but that's a really big issue in our society. And it has lots of practical effects on how we live and our understanding of ourselves. And I'm not going to give you examples of that because I hope they're coming up this evening and next Sunday. And so it's good we're going through at the moment, we would normally at this stage in our worship be going through a book of the Bible, but we're going through our statement of doctrine, our simple statement of what do we believe as a church. And we've got to item 4. Could we have it on the screen? Item 4 in our statement, and this is a new one actually, which we just passed as a church earlier this year, says, we believe in the creation of all humans, male and female, in God's image, which gives them inherent dignity and worth, and is the basis for marriage, and the universal sinfulness and guilt of mankind as a result of the fall. Tonight, we're going to be in the first sentence only. The second sentence will have to wait till next year, because I'm intending to take 2 evenings over the first sentence. What I want to do is, first of all, consider what does it mean that humans are made in the image of God? And then I have 6 applications of that. But don't get frightened, we're going to do 2 applications this evening, and then, God willing, 4 next Sunday evening. That's my plan. So first of all, what does it mean? And then there are loads of issues in society this really is important to. We'll have 2, and then we'll have another 4, God willing, next week. So, thank you, Peter. We can remove that for the moment. We're going to begin with what does it mean to be the image of God? Would you turn, please, to the front of your Bible and Genesis 1. Genesis 1, verse 26. Genesis 1 verse 26 begins, then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. Very famous, but what does it mean? What is it about us that makes us the image of God? Well, there are 4 R's, 4 things beginning with the letter R that come out in Genesis 1 to show us what it means. Here's the first one. It means to reflect. It means to reflect God. Verse 26, let us make man in our image. There are a few children here. Where do you see your image? Have a think, where in your house do you see your image? Where might you go first thing in the morning and last thing in the evening and see your image? In your bathroom, in a mirror. And the mirror, you see your image because it reflects you. Humans being made in the image of God mean we are to reflect God. Like the image in a mirror, the image in the mirror is similar to you but not the same. And humans have similarities to God but are not the same. They reflect. Now, across the centuries, people have tried to identify, well, what is it about us that reflects God? What does it mean we reflect God? What is it about us? And some have said, well, it's our intellect. It's usually clever people like to say it's the intellect. And then arty people say, no, it's our creativity. And others might say, no, it's our moral sense. And some say it's humans' capacity to worship. But the thing is, the Bible doesn't say something in us reflects God. It doesn't say a characteristic of us reflects God. It says man is the image of God. By the way, I'm using the word man in the biblical sense to mean humans as a whole. I know that's politically incorrect, but I don't really care because it's what the Bible says. Because actually it's God's language. It's not just an accident of English. There in the Bible, it uses the word man to mean humanity. So I'm not excluding females here. But it says man is the image of God, not some particular characteristic of man. I'll try to give you an example. I don't know the names of everyone here, so if I've hit your name, sorry, but I'm just going to say Jack is attracted to Jane. If there's a Jack and a Jane here, sorry. But Jack is attracted to Jane. What does it mean? Does it mean he's attracted to her nose or her hair or her voice? Well, he might find her nose and her hair and her voice attractive, or he might find certain aspects less attractive. But anyone who thinks attraction can be reduced down to, is it the nose or the hair or the voice, I would suggest hasn't experienced much attraction. Because you can't reduce it like that. It's something that comes as a whole, even though the parts do play a part. And so the Bible treats humans as a unity, not just a collection of body parts, or even a collection of soul, spirit, and heart. The person as a whole is the image of God. The person as a whole. Yes, we can think about how intellect may be part of this, how creativity may be part of it. We may even think about how our bodies may be part of it. Does it mean that God has ears like this? No. He is a spirit, but he does hear. Not the same way as us, because he doesn't have an eardrum, but he does hear. Does God have eyeballs like these? No, he's a spirit, but he does see. Not by relying on light travelling to him. It's different. Do you see there's an analogy between even our bodies and God? We as whole people are a little reflection of God. But what's the best way to tell what the image of God is like? Jesus. Jesus. Because the Bible several times tells us he is the image of God. I'll just read you one from Colossians chapter 1. Colossians chapter 1 about the Son, Jesus, says, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. You want to know what God is like? Look at Jesus. But also, do you want to know what humans should be like? Look at Jesus. Because he's the perfect human, the image of God. And the Bible ties together wonderfully. The Bible also says, when God restores the image of himself in us, who do we end up like? Jesus, because he's the image of God. I'll read you a couple of verses. This is an interesting verse, 2 Corinthians 3, verse 18. And we who with unveiled faces all reflect the Lord's glory are being transformed into his likeness with ever-increasing glory which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. The Lord there means Jesus. I don't understand this verse fully, but it's a wonderful verse. We reflect the Lord and we become like the Lord. Because he's the image of God. That's God mending his image in us. What was the point of God saving you? If you are saved, I hope you are. What was the point? Romans 8 tells us in verse 29. Do you know that? Romans 8 verse 29 tells us God has chosen people. And why did he choose those people? It says, to be conformed to the likeness of his Son. It's Genesis 1 language. Jesus is the perfect image of God. If you're a Christian, God is mending his image in you to make you like his Son, reflecting God well again. So to be the image of God means to reflect God. Here's the second R, although it's actually 2 R's, to represent his rule. Represent his rule. Let's get back to Genesis 1 and spot the connection. Can you spot the connection here? Verse 26. Then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and so on. And you've got the same thing again, verse 28. Sorry, 27. 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. Verse 28, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and everything. Do you see the connection? You've got there twice, you're told, image of God results in ruling God's creation. Humans are put here as God's representative rulers. They represent his rule. Back when I used to spend time in Zambia, I'd go into a post office or a shop or a local government office, and there would be always a picture prominently displayed. If you went into a shop or a college or a government office or a post office, what would the picture be of? I'm sure it would be of the president. Yes, Richard and Wilfer have lived in Zambia, so they know. It would be of the president. It's his image to represent he rules here. And so humans have been put on earth as God's image. It's a little like that. It's to represent that God rules. We are here to represent that God rules. How? We are to rule, it says in Genesis 1, but we are to rule for God and like God. We don't rule for ourselves, we rule his creation for him and like him. Now you might say, how on earth can we rule like God? We're nothing like God. You know, in Genesis 1, he's making things out of nothing. And have you ever tried that? I take it you've not even tried, because it's rather silly. But in Genesis 1, God wasn't just making things out of nothing. What else was he doing? He said, let there be light. Light was made out of nothing. But what did he then do? He separated light from darkness. He separated day from night. He invented sea and land out of nothing. And what did he then do? Separate them. You read through Genesis 1, there's making out of nothing, but then he's putting things in order. And he's filling the earth with good things. And he's caring for his world. Well, isn't that rather like verse 28, where we are to care for and fill and order God's world? And that gives great value to a whole load of activities we do as humans. Science. It's like verse 28. It's like God, ordering and caring for his world. Industry, agriculture, being a vet, creative arts, the caring professions, looking after the home and family. God is not just interested in things that happen in church. All these other things are a part of being his image, representing his rule. They have value. We have another way to represent God's rule, and it's like this. Children, have a think in your head, what year is it? Well, it's 2024. 2024 what? AD. What does AD mean? Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. Jesus, the image of God, is Lord, and he's on the throne, and we are his ambassadors. And we represent his rule by telling people Jesus is Lord. He's risen from the dead. Bow to him. He's a good king. We represent his rule, in other words, by gospel work. Let's have another R. Being the image of God means we reflect him, we represent his rule, and thirdly, it means relationship. Relationship. When God made man, how did God refer to himself? Verse 26. Verse 26. Then God said, let us make man in our image. What does that tell you? God's more than one person. Read on and you find God is three persons in unity. And then what does he do? He makes, verse 26, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule. That's funny, isn't it? Man, singular, them, plural. Verse 27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. Do you see the parallel? God is three persons in relationship, in unity, and he makes man to be this one being, but plural. Persons in relationship, reflecting him. Now, the relationship most explicit here is marriage because it's male and female, and you read on into chapter 2 and it's Adam and Eve and they're married. But that's far from the only relationship. There are three relationships humans have in Genesis 1. Do you know what the three relationships are? Well, the biggest one is with God. He's creator and king. They obey him. He cares for them. Then there's with each other. Humans loving their neighbours. Okay, in the case of the first two, there's just two of them, but it's with each other. And then there is relating to creation, as we've just seen, ruling and caring. When the perfect image of God came, Jesus, he never had a human marriage, so we mustn't turn Genesis 1 into it's just all about marriage. The perfect image of God never had a human marriage. But he perfectly fulfilled all those three relationships. To God, to other humans, to the creation. It would be a very good exercise sometime. We won't do it now, but I'd recommend it to you. Read through the Gospels and spot how Jesus related to God, to other humans, and to the natural creation. That would be a well worthwhile exercise to do. Let's have the fourth R. To be made in the image of God means, fourthly, to be responsible. To be responsible. Now, we've got a few children here. I wonder if they ever do spot the difference puzzles. Yeah, can you spot the difference between these two verses? Verse 22 and verse 28. Verse 22 is speaking about animals. This is about the animals. Verse 22, God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the water in the seas and let the birds increase on the earth." Then verse 28, this is about humans. Verse 28, God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it," and so on. Did you spot the little difference? Verse 22, God said it about the animals. Verse 28, it explicitly says God said it to the humans. There is a difference. There's a difference. Verse 22 is just about them. That's what animals will do. Verse 28, to the humans, it's a command. And they are responsible, we are responsible, to obey. The animals aren't held responsible. God just put an instinct in them. They will procreate. They will feed their young. They will fill the earth with more birds and the seas with more fish. But verse 28 is a command. We are held responsible beings. We make choices to obey or disobey, and we are held responsible. From our kitchen window, we can see a bird box. And in spring, it's lovely to watch. The blue tits are all the time flying backwards and forwards. It's amazing how hard they work to feed their young, flying backwards and forwards all the time, collecting seeds from the silver birch tree, I think that's what they're doing, and taking them and feeding their young. It's rather ironic we see that from our kitchen window, because what are we doing in our kitchen? Well, especially when the children were younger, feeding our young. We used to think, aren't we just like a more complex version of the blue tits? They feed their young, we feed our young. No, because God's just put an instinct in them. Whereas for us, it's a responsibility. It's not an instinct, it's not a drudgery, but it's an act of obedience to God. With awareness, God's given us a valuable role to play. It's part of being his image. And that gives us dignity. But it also means we're held responsible. With dignity comes responsibility. Back to our home again. In our home, moths have been eating the carpet. Very annoying. They make holes in the carpet. So if I see a moth, I catch it if I can and kill it. Sorry to any animal lovers here. You might report me to the RSPCA. But if I see a moth, I will catch it and kill it if I can. I don't catch it and trap it and hold it prisoner for 3 days as punishment for its crime of eating the carpet. Because it's not a crime, is it? Because it's just a moth. They are not responsible for their actions. Now, our society increasingly thinks of us as just animals. And increasingly that means viewing us as just chemical machines. These chemicals work to make one person bad-tempered and another person kind and thoughtful. But you can't hold them responsible. It's just all chemicals. But the Bible says, no, we're more than that. We're the image of God. And with that dignity comes responsibility. And so God will treat all humans with this dignity. All will give an account to him. All will be held responsible to him for what you and I have done with the life he's given us. 2 Corinthians says we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ to answer for what we've done in our bodies made in God's image. That means we need Jesus, doesn't it? For forgiveness. By the way, have you noticed every aspect of the image of God we've seen has brought us back to Jesus? No surprise there. Okay, I've gone through there far from comprehensively, far from covering it all. I've gone through 4 things it means to be the image of God. I want to move on now to some applications. Humans are the image of God. It's so important for so many issues in our lives and in our wider society. And I've got 6 to tell you, but just 2 tonight and 4 next time, God willing. But first of all, before that, to get you thinking, I want us to just, as a sort of little taster, see something of the mess our society gets into by rejecting this truth. So, Peter, can we have a picture on the screen? This picture, hopefully coming up, is from Punch magazine, which was a famous magazine in the Victorian era. That was from 1888. I don't know if it's at all visible from the back, but there's some letters here you might just make out, CHAOS. There's some worms, and gradually becoming monkeys, which are becoming humans, and there's a bald-headed man with a beard in the middle. And this letter V there is really an old-fashioned U. Man is but a worm. I'd like you just turn to someone near you. I'm going to give you just half a minute or a few seconds. What is that saying about humans? There are quite a few answers. Can you just, half a minute, what is that saying about humans? Give it a try. Okay, I'm going to stop you. I know that wasn't very long, but I've got a bit nervous that maybe quite a lot of you can't see the picture very well. Okay, would someone like to tell us something it says about humans? There's quite a few answers. What does it say about humans? Not worth much. Man is but a worm is the most obvious one because we've just come from the worms, haven't we? I don't know how well it's visible, but there's this cycle, you see, supposed to represent evolution, going from worms to some sort of tadpole-like thing to some sort of ape to a caveman and so on. We're not worth much. We're just overdeveloped worms. But it's saying a bit more than that. What else is it saying? Well, I don't know. Where do you get that from, Philip? Snake. Oh, I see. I don't think it's supposed to be representing the devil and the snake. No. No, although we certainly are sinful. What have we come from, according to this? What's it all start with? Chaos. It's just all random. There is no rhyme or reason. There is no design to this. We're just a product of chaos. What else? Anything else it's saying about us? We're just an animal, yes. There's nothing here about soul or spirit, is there? We may be just a worm. Man is but a worm, but is there any pride here? We are the top, aren't we? Here we are the top. Humans are the top. What does it get? And what sort of person is at the top? I think this is no coincidence. I think this was produced in Victorian England. What sort of person is at the top? A white man who's clearly a wealthy man. Look at him, top hat and all that sort of thing. This tends to follow if we're just a product of evolution. Are other people, other nations, other races, less well-off people, less able people further down the evolutionary scale? There is this strange combination of we're just a worm, but we're also very proud because we are the top and those ones aren't. Where is God in this? We're just on our own, aren't we? We're just on our own. It ends with a man tipping his hat to, who's he tipping his hat to? Charles Darwin, the person who dreamt up Darwinian evolution. Yeah, who interestingly is made to look like the picture of Adam in the Sistine Chapel. But in the Sistine Chapel, it's Adam reaching out to God. But here it's just Charles Darwin and a Victorian upper-class man. Humans on our own, worshipping each other effectively. Yeah, so there's quite a bit in it, and it illustrates the confused mess, the contradictory beliefs we get once we reject the Bible's truth. We're the image of God. Okay, thank you, Peter. I thought that might get our brain juices working as we now get some applications of what we've learnt. And here's the first one. All humans are the image of God. All humans are the image of God. Let's read some verses. Genesis 1, verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Then please turn forward to chapter 5, verse 1. Chapter 5, verse 1 and 2. This is the written account of Adam's line. When God created man, he made him in the likeness of God. He created them, male and female, and blessed them. And when they were created, he called them man. And then just please go forward another page or two to chapter 9. Chapter 9, verse 6. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God has God made man. And then please go forward a whole lot to almost the end of your Bible and the little letter of James. So just after Hebrews and just before Revelation, you've got James and chapter 3, verse 9. James 3, verse 9. With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men who have been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers, this should not be. Do you see what verse 9 is saying? Whoever you curse, whatever human you curse, with your words, whether the Queen or Hitler, whether Kim Kardashian or a homeless beggar, they're made in the image of God. Now, we have looked a little bit in our first section at what the image of God means. But I have to admit, the Bible's main emphasis is not what the image of God means. The Bible's main emphasis is that humans are the image of God. We have to do a bit of detective work to find out what it means. That's what we've been doing with our 4 R's. But it isn't the Bible's main emphasis. The Bible's main emphasis is simply, as we've read in those, 4 verses, all humans are the image of God. That's what it emphasizes. All are the image of God. And especially in Genesis 9 and James 3, we see that means value and dignity for all humans, whoever they are. That's the main emphasis. All humans have worth. Now, I expect most people here have had to endure school assemblies, haven't you? At some point, most of us. And I've often heard in school assemblies the head teacher saying, everyone is important. We value all people. In fact, many schools now have, it's almost like their religious catechism, the UN Declaration on Human Rights, which makes all these declarations about humans are these wonderful people who have all sorts of inherent rights. And the question I ask, and I maybe annoy my children a bit by keeping on going on about this, is why? Why should we value all humans? Why do they all have dignity and worth? Why does a child have a right to this or that or the other? Where do they get it from? And as far as I can see, the schools don't answer that bit. Because in the end, they believe what we saw, man is but a worm. They may not say that, but they basically believe that still. Man is but a worm. We have the reason. We have the reason. And the reason is man is not but a worm. Man, male and female, is made in the image of God. All humans are the image of God, and the implications of this are so widespread. This is massive. I'm just going to give you a few examples for the sake of time. I'll just give you a few examples of this. Here's one. Every human of every ethnic group is the image of God. That means, isn't it obvious, there is no room for racism. There is no room for feeling superior to another person on the basis of their ethnicity. Our society thinks, yes, that's obvious, we've solved that one, but I think actually, if you poke below the surface, I'm not so sure how much we have solved it. And maybe it's partly because we have removed the basis, which is all are in the image of God, whatever ethnicity. Notice I didn't say whatever race, because there aren't different races. There's just the human race made in the image of God. Here's another implication. All humans have value and worth, regardless of whether they are outside the womb or inside the womb. And that means our nation, which currently over the last few years has killed intentionally around 200,000 unborn humans, is guilty of a terrible atrocity. I'm talking, of course, about abortion. Here's another implication. All humans are responsible beings, reflections of God to represent his rule. That means slavery is wrong. For a human to be a slave of another human, treated as just a piece of property. We say, yeah, of course, we know that. We sorted that out a couple of centuries ago. Well, no, actually, there's still plenty of slavery around in this world. Here's another implication. Who is valued in the church? Who's valued in the church? Are people with better education or higher status jobs valued more than those who don't have those? I think we have a tendency to that. I've heard comments that have sounded very much like that have really disappointed me. We've got to get rid of such teaching. All are the image of God. Who do we tell the gospel to? All are the image of God. All should be told the gospel. Well, you say, that's obvious, yes. But sometimes churches do things like this. We will go for the strategic people. The people who may become business leaders and politicians and journalists. I've heard that here from this platform, and my heart sank when I heard it from someone. Because I regard that as just dressed up elitism. Sometimes it's said, we'll go for those people because they are the gatekeepers of information. They have the ability to influence others. Whenever I hear people say that, they seem to be talking about MPs and journalists. Well, what about hairdressers and taxi drivers? Aren't they gatekeepers of information? They get to talk to people. Let's not go in for just disguised elitism. All are the image of God. Much more could be said about that. I leave you to ponder it. Let's go for this next application. What is man? What is man? Would you come with me to Psalm 8, which I read at the beginning? Psalm 8. It doesn't say the words image of God, but it so obviously comes directly out of Genesis 1, verse 26. Psalm 8. Did you notice when I read it earlier? Verse 3, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, then people often read it like this. What is man? What is this little thing, man, compared with the great stars? Oh, he's just a little nothing. When I consider the stars, they're so great. What is man? Just a little nothing. But that's actually misreading. It's putting the emphasis in the wrong place. Because the psalm is going to say, man is amazing. Humans rule God's world. They are the pinnacle. So it's effectively saying this. When I consider the stars, massive, amazing. What is this thing, man, that is the pinnacle of creation? Stars are not the pinnacle. Humans are. What is this thing, man, who rules all God's amazing world? What is man? Think of the Punch cartoon. Our society says man is but a worm. But it's all confused because our society says we've got rid of God, we've grown up, we don't need God anymore. Now humans are the top, humans are great, we've grown up, we can go our own way without God. But it doesn't work. It's all unraveling. Because once you've stopped believing in God as creator, you soon find you can't believe in humans as anything special. Man is but a worm. Humans then become just bags of chemicals, aren't we? How are we any more than bags of chemicals once we've said, no, don't believe in God, we're not in his image? We are very complex, very clever bags of chemicals, but do we have any more significance than a clever piece of artificial intelligence? And you can see the confusion our society is getting into there, isn't it? And the fear about the future. Our significance compared with AI. One modern thinker has said, we are just biological information processing machines. That's all we are, biological information processing machines. Popular scientists are now saying it's an illusion to think we make real choices. It's just the chemicals in you which are all a product of nurture or nature. Or an illusion to think we have moral accountability, or even a continuing identity. Now that might sound really odd to you, but they're saying it's an illusion to think we have continuing identity. Have you ever done this? Have you ever looked at a photo of yourself from years ago, let's say when you were a little child, and thought, in what way am I the same person as the person looking at me from the photo? Have you ever done that? Maybe that seems bizarre to you, but in what way are you the same person? You're not the same atoms as that person. You know that, don't you? Yeah, the cells have all died and been replaced, basically all of them. So you're not the same atoms. You are physically not the same stuff as that person. That's all gone and been replenished. You say, but I have the same memories, continuity of memory. But some people don't have continuity of memory. You can lose your memory. Does that mean you're not the same person? You say, but it's the same DNA. I've got the same DNA. Well, do you see what you've just done? You've just reduced us to an algorithm. Yeah, we're just an algorithm. We're just a genetic code. What if someone took your DNA, that genetic code, and in 2,000 years' time, technology has advanced enough to put your DNA into a new body? Would it still be you? Well, if you are, in essence, just the algorithm, this sort of thing fries your mind a bit, doesn't it? But can you see the way our society is going? Total confusion about what is man. That's what you get when you reject the Bible's teaching. The Bible has the answer to all of this, which is we are not just a biological information processing machine. You are a person because you are made in the image of the personal God. As he has continuing identity over time, so do you. As he makes real decisions, so do you. He has made you for great things. And this, yet again, brings us back to Jesus. Are you still in Psalm 8? Psalm 8 says, "What is man that you are mindful of him? You have made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor." Psalm 8 says, humans are amazing and were made to rule God's world. But then Hebrews 2 quotes Psalm 8. Hebrews 2 quotes Psalm 8, and it says, we don't yet see that because we've broken it. We've broken the image of God by our rebellion against God. We don't see humans doing what Psalm 8 says, not properly. But Hebrews 2 says, but we do see Jesus, who was for a little while made lower than the angels, now crowned with glory and honor. And Hebrews 2 goes on to say, and he wasn't just doing that for himself. It was to lead many sons to glory, to restore the glory of the image of God in millions and millions of humans. That's what he was doing it for. Humanity is going to be remade. The future of humanity is a big issue in our society. So next time I want to think about the future of humanity and 3 other applications of us being in the image of God.